Welcome to Gotham, a city that has been strangely quiet since the dark Avenger of the Night, Batman, ended the Joker's reign of terror. However, lately, there have been new sightings that have been nagging the metropolis. As I was saying, there have been sightings of a beautiful woman with a mask, a whip, and a stunning black outfit, and a mysterious penguin creature with revenge on its mind. Just when we need him most, Batman returns.
Tonight, an exclusive first look at the making of this summer's epic adventure, Batman Returns, starring Michael Keaton as the Caped Crusader.
I thought this was going to be kind of a breeze, but it turned out it wasn't like that at all.
Danny DeVito as the evil Penguin.
Who can hate a penguin?
Here, kitty, kitty, kitty.
Yeah.
And Michelle Pfeiffer as the sensuous but deadly Catwoman.
Good at heart, but was always running astray.
We go behind the scenes with director Tim Burton, the man who took the comic book creation of Bob Kane and made him a movie star. Now, Burton creates a brand new Batman adventure with new sets and incredible new toys. It's the story of one legendary hero, 2 notorious villains, and 3 Hollywood stars.
Good evening. I'm Robert Urich. Tonight, the adventure continues with the Bat, the Cat, and the Penguin. In Batman Returns, the dark driving force is still Batman himself.
It's kind of fun to play such an enormous, heroic character. I thought this was going to be kind of a breeze because Tim and I had talked about it. We figured we had this pretty well wired, you know, what I did, what I didn't do, what I needed to do, what I absolutely didn't need to do, what was better for me not to do. And we thought, well, this will actually be easy. This will be one of those where you just show up, you know, turn around, look into camera, and spray a little sweat on your face like you just beat up 5 guys and go home. And it turned out it wasn't like that at all. In fact, in a lot of ways, this was harder because I found myself kind of doing an impersonation of myself, which was, first of all, impossible. Second of all, really strange. And so I just dropped that and said, no, you gotta just open up like it's the first time and just trust that, you know, the character will be there, I guess.
He's a very strange character because he's a character that likes to remain in the shadows, has a real split personality. He's fairly remote and conflicted. So in the first movie, I think we were really exploring that, and I felt like we arrived at it at the end, really. So I feel, and I think Michael will feels the same way.
You actually feel really good and comfortable.
More comfortable so that we can take this foundation and maybe explore it a little bit deeper.
So I was interested in doing that.
To destroy Batman, we must first turn him into what he hates the most. Namely us.
Doctors have spent years trying to analyze these characters, so I mean, you know, we'll do the best we can in 2 hours, but there's lots to explore. It's not a sequel. It's not a sequel in the sense it doesn't sort of pick up necessarily where one left off, kind of a thing. And action! The point is to make it feel fresh and make it feel exciting and new and still be Batman.
You missed.
Yeah, Alfred. Go to number 4. Hey, look at go for the phone.
Does it look funny on the phone?
I think that seems weirder.
That does. I've never done this. You want to see when you're not out doing this.
And if you're just being normal, you know what I mean?
Just acting rhetorical. I'm kind of be winded.
Yeah. And then, see, in one case, maybe it's good, Michael, that it's a little bit, it's like you're
weird.
being normal.
Yeah. Well, that's what I think is kind of weirdly great about it.
Alfred, bring me some antiseptic ointment, would you? Coming.
In presenting a characterization as unusual as Batman's, even the smallest scenes demanded the detailed attention of Keaton and Burton, and the lighter moments were a welcome break in the complexity and pressure of a massive 6-month shooting schedule.
I'm beat. pushed.
The story of Batman Returns.
It was really fun to watch the expression on Danny DeVito's and Michelle's face.
I've never worked on a film this big before.
In the movie, the Penguin tries a hostile takeover of Gotham City.
I was pumped.
The mysterious Catwoman
Actually more complicated than I could have even imagined.
tries to sink her claws into Batman.
And my claws were getting stuck and everything.
Meanwhile, Bruce Wayne is attracted to a strangely familiar woman.
I think this guy probably goes big when he goes.
And so does the Penguin.
Likes her, lusts after her.
But this cat isn't looking for dates.
About every 15th day, that's usually where it rolls around with me, that I'm just kind of standing there waiting, and I kind of look at what everybody's wearing. I look at myself, and it gets really tremendously absurd. You know, when you kind of step outside yourself and you realize this is really nuts what we're doing. You just got to kind of laugh and say, well, here we go.
When we come back from the rooftops of Gotham, the perfect enemy for Batman comes to life.
You know, also the whip is really lethal.
For 5 decades, Batman has battled evil in Gotham. Now there are 2 fresh villains lurking in the shadows, waiting. One is seductively beautiful, lethally dangerous. You never know where she'll appear out of the shadows. And like Michelle Pfeiffer, who portrays this lady of mystery, she is a force to be reckoned with.
People say to me, now, is she a bad guy or is she a good guy? Good at heart, but was always running astray. Yeah. No pun intended. I thought it would be a couple of scenes and probably, you know, not a fully developed character. But I didn't care. I would have done it anyway because it's a kind of idol from my childhood. Then to my surprise, I read the script and I found her to be very interesting and very complicated, sort of psychologically. And actually quite a challenge as an actress. I am Catwoman. Hear me roar.
She starts out as as a fairly normal person.
Here, kitty, 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 kitty.
She suffers being in a man's world and all of the
Suppressed rage.
the torture that goes along with
Being a woman.
Catwoman comes in? What do you think it's on my mind?
Down, Oswald.
Parcheesi?
I wouldn't touch you to scratch you.
She's basically somebody who's driven to do something.
Discovering just how lethal she can be and just sort of what she wants to destroy. Anthony, the longest. He was a great teacher.
I'm Michelle Pfeiffer's whip trainer and choreographer. Most people, have a tendency to raise their eyebrow when you say whip. The trick about it is traveling faster than the speed of sound. I'm breaking the sound barrier. So there is a certain hazard to it because it can cut skin, it can break bones. She is doing things with the whip that will make Indiana Jones green. That 90% of the people who do this for a profession can't do.
In this scene, Catwoman wants to whip off the heads of 4 mannequins, and Michelle's 3 months of training really paid off. She performed this difficult and potentially dangerous scene perfectly on the very first take.
Action, Michelle!
Michelle was doing the weirdest things in this movie in terms of things that she had to do. A couple hours to put this makeup, put this costume. Now come and use this whip, Here, put this bird in your mouth.
Nice birdie. No, I don't think I've worn any rubber suits in any other movies.
It's just all really fun.
She's luscious. She's beautiful. She should be mine.
One thing with the black rubber, it almost looks liquid on the body. I mean, she looks like she's wearing black glass. I mean, it's incredibly beautiful. And when you get someone who can really move, like a cat, which Michelle can, it's very fluid looking. It doesn't look like clothes.
I don't know whether to open fire or fall in love.
She's a very feline creature, and she starts identifying with the cats and then literally makes herself a homemade cat suit. We wanted it to be tight to the body and sexy, and that's an obvious area to go into. I mean, especially with someone like Michelle Pfeiffer, who's, got legs for days. And, you want to expose all those wonderful limbs and everything.
The first time I put the outfit on, I thought, I can't walk, I can't breathe, I can't hear, I can't act like this. And that's how I felt. It took me a long time to get used to all of the elements.
She's so talented. There was never any question in my mind that not only was she going to be really terrific in this, but she was going to figure out how to do this.
She's wasting her time with that bozo on the hill.
When I saw her, the immediate impression I got is that she's a great match with Michael Keaton. I mean, they're just, there's 4 great eyes there, between the two of them. And that's very important to these characters, is what comes through.
He sees himself in this woman. And there are points where, if you really want to examine it, they almost lose themselves in each other.
You got kind of a dark side, don't you?
No darker than yours, Bruce. It was a challenge. It was actually one of the most challenging roles I've done. The thought of busting Batman makes me feel all dirty.
Next up, we meet the Penguin.
He is, without a doubt, one of the most evil characters that I've ever encountered in my life.
Danny DeVito, when the Bat, the Cat, and the Penguin continues. Underneath Gotham streets lurks a twisted creature with a brilliant mind and an umbrella full of evil tricks. He also has an aquatic army of helpers that wreak havoc on unsuspecting Gotham. He's the Penguin, neither human nor foul, a character that's graphically brought to life by a man whose persona is larger than life, Danny DeVito.
The name is Oswald Cobblepot. I get around mostly by foot in my network of tunnels, but I have been known to ride in a duck. But he is, without a doubt, one of the most evil characters that I've ever encountered in my life.
Right now, my troops are fanning out across town.
50 years ago, Bob Kane introduced perhaps the most unusual Batman villain of all, a dapper little fellow named Oswald Cobblepot, also known as the Penguin.
When I created the Penguin in the comic strip, I thought he was comical looking.
When I was a kid, I read the comic books.
He looked so unvillainous.
You have kind of an image of this Penguin character already.
The Penguin looks like a cute little fella.
But just get that right out of your mind, because this is so totally unique and different, especially coming from this man.
In the comics, I thought that was one of the characters that had the least amount of a foundation psychologically. It was more just a funny-looking man, as far as I could tell. But we're making him the Penguin.
Director Tim Burton is also an artist, and his drawing of the Penguin became the blueprint for the look of the character. And to achieve the original look, DeVito endured a 3-hour makeup routine.
It's this cold, clammy glue. It would just go, right? Just like that, and then all in here, That was the only moment. That's like walking into the water, really cold.
You take big leaps in your character, So when I'd look at him, I was kind of envious sometimes, because I knew you could really get locked away and just go for it.
It's really creepy. I was frightened. He handed me one of his slimy little flippers, And he looked at me. That was it. I said, bye. Also, he stays in character all the time.
I loved it. I just loved it.
That'll be another hour,
It's that Penguin thing,
For the Penguin's commando army, Burton needed a battalion of live trained penguins.
What we've trained the birds to do is to come to a call, a whistle. We've trained them to wear their little missiles in their little hats. When they get to where they're going, they each get a fish.
Come on, guys, hurry up. Come on.
This is Lucy. She's been trained to wear these harnesses. She's been acclimated to this for about 4 weeks. She's worn wardrobe in the past. They don't mind it. It's part of the deal for them. The stages that we're working on are cooled to 45, 50 degrees. The qualifications were, if you were a penguin and you were available, you had the job.
Penguins! My babies! It was great working with the penguins. I had tons of penguins. Tons. Who can hate a penguin?
The time has come to punish all of Gotham!
I rule the birds.
Well, maybe not all the birds. To supplement the live penguins, Burton asked the makeup effects master Stan Winston, who won Oscars for Aliens and Terminator 2, to create penguin robots.
We are duplicating life so that we can get some performance out of a creature that otherwise would not be able to perform. If we do our job correctly, you should not be aware that these are not real penguins.
Are you talking to me? Are you looking at me?
The special effects technology that was utilized to create the illusion of real life also created the penguin's trademark weapon of choice.
They're very helpful. I can fly with my umbrellas. I can roast you like a marshmallow.
What is that supposed to hypnotize me?
No, just give you a splitting headache.
All of these characters, Batman, Catwoman, Penguin, there's a split with all of them. It was with the Joker also. And I think that's the most interesting thing about all of these characters. What they want to be versus what they are. And what they look like versus what they think they look like. You just get all the emotions of humor, horror, sadness, drama, absurdity, and reality all at once.
Tragic irony or poetic justice? You tell me.
This stage right here, stage 16 on the Warner Brothers lot, is one of the biggest sound stages in the world. This, along with 12 other stages in Hollywood, was filled with spectacularly unique sets depicting the world of Gotham. Well, to create this new look, Tim Burton assembled a world-class team of creative artists and technicians, and the result is all sorts of wonderful new toys.
So we have a new and improved Batarang. We have a new Bat Ski boat, and we have the Batmobile.
It's a vision that we all remember. The Batmobile rocketing down the streets of Gotham to face the perils of yet another deadly encounter. Hey, and no speed limit.
Tim created his own world for this movie. We didn't use anything from the real.
For over 50 years, we have thrilled to the exploits of this mortal man who somehow accomplishes superhuman deeds. As he fights for justice against the evil forces, we are right there with him. And our children see what we saw growing up, a hero. As long as we have our imagination and a little fantasy, we will have Batman. Good night from Gotham City.
On the second one, it was always the desire to kind of do something else, but still keeping the spirit of Batman. I mean, we wouldn't want to change it to where all of a sudden it was a completely different thing. But, you know, you're working with other writers, designers, actors, artists. You're not, myself included, don't want to just do the same thing. So everything was slightly redesigned or completely redesigned or rethought, but it's always trying to keep within some idea of the Batman that we first made.
Tim and I had talked about it. We figured we had this pretty well wired, you know, what I did, what I didn't do, what I needed to do, what I absolutely didn't need to do, what was better for me not to do. And we thought, well, this will actually be easy. This will be one of those where you just show up, you know, turn around, look into camera, and People kind of spray a little sweat on your face like you just beat up 5 guys and go home. It turned out it wasn't like that at all.
It did have a darkness and a complexity and a resonance that I think the audience at the times, a lot of people didn't expect. You know, it wasn't just kind of a fun, cool comic book movie. It was something more than that.
You didn't invite me, so I crashed!
Tim and I had several kind of loose conversations about where the movie would go with input from the studio. They really wanted the Penguin because they sort of saw the Penguin as the number 2 Batman villain. We wanted to do Catwoman, so we wound up doing Penguin and Catwoman. And I did 2 drafts. It was a deal where the studio was now at the point where they wanted to proceed with the movie. And they said, Tim, come on, you got to do it. You going to do it or not going to do it? And Tim was very averse, at the end of the day, to the idea of coming in and doing a sequel because he thought he'd kind of, look, I've shot my wad on Batman. I've said what I have to say about Batman. I don't really know if I want to do this. And he was very reluctant to get involved. And finally, the way that they kind of got to him was to say, well, what if the second movie is really just a Tim Burton movie? And that kind of got his attention and got him thinking about what he could do with it again. How extreme could you go with the Penguin? How extreme could you go with Catwoman? What if you didn't have to worry about, sort of the fidelity to the mythology, all of that kind of stuff like that?
I wouldn't have done it right after the first one because that was like the last thing you'd want to do was go right into another one of those. So I did Edward Scissorhands after Batman, which was nice, sort of different kind of experience, which was great. But then I was still intrigued by the other characters, like Catwoman, came to mind right away because that's next to the Joker. That was probably my favorite second villain in the piece. And then that got us to thinking about, well, the Penguin. You could find the psychological profile of Batman, Catwoman, Joker, but the Penguin was just this guy with a cigarette, and a top hat, and didn't really, what is he? So, but then started thinking about, Catwoman, Batman, sort of this animal people, and Penguin, and started to think about him, trying to find a profile for him, and so it was fun to kind of come up with the sort of bad freak, but again, that duality of somebody who's been sort of wronged and has that sort of split, not like dark but sort of human animal, and sort of using the animal motif as a strong image for the film. And then I started to get excited about it.
Well, once we decided, that Tim was going to direct the sequel, we jumped right in with the script. So it was challenging. It was not an easy screenplay to develop.
Most of the stuff that I had done for that movie wound up being scrapped. And the decision that came out of that was just basically to go with pretty much a whole new direction with the story.
Tim and I never had a conversation about what are fans of the comic book going to think? What are the people going to think? What are the sponsors who, have promotions connected to the movie going to think of this movie? We never had those conversations. We never thought about it. We were really just about the art. We surprisingly got very little directives from the studio, like you must have, Robin, and there was none of that really. I think we did try it. We did try something, and Tim was big on not making a big deal about it. We wanted to work in maybe a Robin character. I could tell he was not enthusiastic about it from the get-go. But we wanted more of a thing where it was kind of like something that would be hinted at and then developed in a later movie.
At some point, there was a discussion of Robin, and again, the only way I could see it was to try and find a profile that worked. But what ended up happening was, again, I think, at the end of it all, we just realized we had too many characters, and people can complain, even without Robin, they complain that there maybe is too many characters, and always with, there was always the idea that the third or fourth, at this point, I think Warner saw it as a potentially ongoing thing, maybe, and therefore, there's always that, well, if we don't do it in this one, they'll do it in the next one kind of deal.
You know, what Tim is able to do is make characters that are mythic. He is able to connect with them on an emotional level and make them real and grounded, so that even though they seem to be, you know, otherworldly or larger than life, their emotions are real and relatable.
More than any other person who's interpreted Batman, that I really think that Tim Burton has the most in common with Batman.
I remember hearing things like, oh, you know, in the first movie, you know, the Joker stole the show, and in the second movie, you know, he's hardly in it. It's all the Catwoman and Penguin, and I always felt that those people, for me, were missing the point of the character of Batman. You know, what he is. That's why I didn't like Robin involved, just because this guy wants to remain as hidden as possible and in the shadows as possible and unrevealing about himself as possible. So, you know, all of those things, you know, he's not going to eat up screen time by these big speeches and doing, you know, dancing around the Batcave, you know. I always felt he was in at the right amount and the right sort of level of him.
Mark. Okay. And action!
We really wanted Michael Keaton to be Batman and Bruce Wayne again. I mean, you know, it's always hard, I think, for an actor to commit to playing the same character over and over again. They have to feel confident that they have something more to bring, you know, to the character. And, you know, Michael definitely struggled with that and questioned it, which I think was good. You know, it pushed us to really make sure that the character, you know, reached the level of the first movie.
I think Michael was game for it. I think he was probably game for it the same reason I was, which is, you know, he'd done the character and got to kind of revisit it with other actors and other people, other situations. So, you know, I think that was probably the lure for him. I don't think it was the joy of climbing back into the suit, you know, but I think it was for those reasons probably.
The only challenge I thought of before I started was the mere fact that I had never done a character twice. So I was interested in doing that. What I hadn't anticipated was, I was into my second or third day, I realized something seemed a little off, and what I think I was doing was imitating myself. You're playing the same character, so I had to keep thinking, well, I've played this character, so what does he do here? And I excluded any other possibilities. So once I found myself saying, okay, this seems like what he would do here, but it doesn't sound right and it doesn't feel very right. So I found myself kind of doing an impersonation of myself, which was, first of all, impossible, and second of all, really strange. And so I just dropped that and said, no, you gotta just open up like it's the first time and just trust that, you know, the character will be there, I guess.
It was really fun, you know, casting this movie. What a dream come true to have to cast the Penguin and Catwoman in one movie, you know. And I think everybody always just automatically said Danny DeVito's the Penguin. Who else is going to be the Penguin?
There was a piece in the paper. Somebody said, wouldn't it be cool if Danny played the Penguin? And I looked at it and went, wow, you know, I never thought about that. That's how I sort of got introduced to it.
Danny was the first and only choice for that. There's no question about it.
And action, Danny!
Tim creates that great atmosphere, that world of, like, where you feel like everything is an invention. Tim did a painting that he gave me. It was very colorful, kind of circus tent, and there was a boy sitting in front of it. That was Oswald as a toddler. He didn't have hands. He had, you know, flippers, and he was kind of rotund and small, and he had kind of a weird pointed features, and the caption read, "My name is Jimmy, but they call me the hideous penguin boy." It was a great image to start from.
He kind of became the character and was the Penguin throughout the movie, on and off the set.
He stays in character all the time. and it's really creepy.
I really got to eat a lot of raw fish. It was great. I always liked sushi, but this was really spectacular. Raw and cold and just fresh. Tasty. They were really good. God, my mouth is watering. What time is it?
And if somebody put their fingers too close to his mouth, he might just take it off.
Electroshock therapy. What a bargain.
We initially had cast Annette Bening as Catwoman, and did wardrobe things and all sorts of fittings and stuff. And really close to shooting, I got a call one morning, and sort of long pause on the phone, and she said she was pregnant, and I was I'd never had like such a split mixed feeling in my life. I was like very extremely happy for her, and then was like dropping down a dark abyss at the same time.
And it was kind of a crazy period because I would say every single actress from 20 to 45 on the planet wanted to be Catwoman, and we were kind of barraged.
Sean Young, who had originally been set to play the lead in the first picture, wanted very much to do the Catwoman, and she appeared in cat costume one day at the studio.
I thought that it would work to be sort of like aggressive in the sense that that's what Catwoman would have done. She would have just gone, and she would have gone in there, and that's just what I did. I did like a major kind of Catwoman adventure.
The next thing I knew, my office door flew open, which tells you about the difference in security these days. And Michael Keaton and I saw Sean Young dressed as Catwoman leap over my sofa and say, "I am Catwoman." We looked at each other and went, whoa.
I was only told about it. But the eyewitnesses, I believe. I don't think it was a UFO sighting or, the legend of Bigfoot kind of a situation. I think the resources are fairly reliable.
When Michelle Pfeiffer expressed an interest, something just clicked where we thought, she's perfect. She also could be both Selina Kyle and Catwoman.
I met with Tim, and I found him very unusual and interesting, and he explained the part to me. And I thought it would be a couple of scenes and probably, not a fully developed character. Then, to my surprise, I read the script, and I found she was just very, actually more complicated than I could have even imagined, just sort of psychologically. And even now, people say to me, now, is she a bad guy or is she a good guy? And the reason that is because the character always was kind of going from one side to the other. And I think that she was always good at heart, but was always running astray.
Well, I tried to lick her, but they didn't put that in. The Penguin is very interested in getting close to that pussycat.
The movie was very much shot out of sequence. So it was a challenge to know where I was half the time. And also, it's real ensemble, so every scene, every moment counts. You don't have a whole movie to develop a whole character, so it was actually one of the most challenging roles I've done.
I wanted to talk to her about it before we started, because I kind of wanted to warn her about what she was in for, but I didn't, and I could only offer sympathy, really, and because there's no suggestion. You can't say, well, here's the way I deal with this kind of picture.
She was very impressive. I mean, two things that impressed me extremely was when the cats were kind of bringing her back to life, her sort of eye flutter and her eyes opening up. I still find that really chilling and amazing. And then that moment where, she put a live bird in her mouth and held it there for several seconds and then let it fly out. I mean, I don't know too many people that would do that. She did it several times, and no bird or person was injured.
Here, look at this. Bob Kane, excellent.
Penguin, Catwoman, Joker. It's an early one.
The Joker, the Penguin,
Robin,
Catwoman.
Batmobile.
The thing that changed from the first to the second was that whole dynamic of the franchise mentality. And so unlike the first one, before I start the second one, you know, toy companies and t-shirt makers and you know, are asking, well, what's this character going to look like? I was having these meetings where, you know, I was like, well, we haven't designed the character yet.
You know, the prep of this film was pretty enormous. Just the set of Gotham City, you know, detailed, beautiful, stylistic set. Bo Welch did an amazing job on this sort of neo-expressionistic, Germanic city that had such character and really was a character in the movie. And, you know, we wanted it to be winter and Christmas and to actually snow inside the soundstage.
The challenge is to create the atmosphere that this is going to be in, and that was about air conditioning sound stages down to a certain temperature and getting the breath and also creating an atmosphere for these real penguins.
The second one was more difficult in the sense that we had weather conditions. You know, we had to cool down the sets for the penguins. So, you know, we were in like 100-degree weather, you know, people in shorts in LA, and we're coming out of the stages in parkas and snow gear, you know, and we have 3 people in full, you know, costume, makeup, you know, and dealing with all of that stuff. But again, you know, it's the actors and the people that keep you going, really.
What was fun about working with Tim was he actually was improvisational about his direction. And he actually did respond to what the actors brought to the space in rehearsal.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a cookbook approach to the shooting of it. His way of covering a scene wasn't conventional. It wasn't like close-ups over the shoulder shots, matching sizes. He did have a sense of how he wanted it edited, and there weren't that many choices. You really couldn't cut it like a dozen different ways because it wasn't covered that way.
In the morning, I was sort of like on this assembly line, and I would be handed from one person to the next. And I felt like I was in Oz. Just my character was such a huge production every day. And it's not even to say what's going on with Danny, what's going on with Michael, what's going on with the set. You know, they're moving buildings around, and I would get lost on the stage all the time because I would walk and they would have moved everything around, and I could never find my way to the set. That's never happened to me before.
The first couple days, it was really fun to watch the expression on Danny DeVito's and Michelle's faces because they just looked absolutely lost. And it was kind of like sadistically funny to me because I knew exactly what they were going through.
We tried to keep it so that Oswald was not just exposed to everybody on the set, on the lot, so they had this little thing. Tim made a kind of a canopy with the art department that I'd travel to the set in this little kind of circus canopy. It was good because you could stay in character. You could just be Oswald, and everybody respected Oswald. They kept their distance, but the crew and the other members of the cast and everybody was really, you know, into it, and they were very respectful.
About every 15th day that's usually where it rolls around with me, that I'm just kind of standing there waiting, and I kind of look at what everybody's wearing. I look at myself, and it gets really tremendously absurd, you know, when you kind of step outside yourself and you realize this is really nuts what we're doing and really kind of goofy. It's really a strange experience, and instead of kind of saying, I've made an enormous mistake here, you just gotta kind of laugh and say, well, here we go. It was more fun to see 2 other people do it, because at first, you know, I looked at Jack and, you know, reminded him now and then we're both grown men doing this. He just wanted to check in every once in a while. But this time I figured, hey, if I go down, I'm going down with 2 other people. So, you know, we're all going down in dumb suits.
Felt like Elvis walking in the scene.
Yeah, I mean, people would start to laugh, but it would be for different reasons. Some reasons would be just the absurdity of it. I think some of it was just exhaustion and, like, insanity. But it was easier for me to laugh because I'm looking at him from the outside, looking at the whole thing. And so sometimes I'd start laughing, and they probably thought, like, what am I laughing about? It's not funny, you know. Why'd you get in this costume? But There was some catching themselves in the mirror and seeing what was going on kind of a thing. But to their credit, they always kept it, they found the right level of keeping it real and finding the humor when it was there.
Obviously, I like the fact that it, there's no pre-sound. It's just, keep the shock of the explosion there.
In terms of the post-production of the movie, it was really kind of scary because we had a summer release date. You have to release these movies in the summer. We had a very tight schedule. And this was, 13 years ago now. We were in production. And, it was before computerized editing. It was before all these, CGI techniques that we have today. It was very different time in terms of making a special effects movie. And it was kind of touch and go for a few weeks there. Would we get the film ready? But, we pulled it off. We pulled it off almost to the last minute.
There was one shot at the end that I think cost like $250,000, and we had to do it on a weekend with the Catwoman, keeping her alive. I think it was something like that at the end. It was a studio note.
I remember saying, I don't think it can be done in the meeting.
Always these big Hollywood movies,
when you put these things together, you don't really know what it's about. You're looking at the trees and not always the forest, and that's the big challenge in what we do. So when it's finally together, especially with Tim's movies, who is really, because he comes from an animation background, he more has a clearer idea of what the end result is, compared to a lot of directors who are very talented but find their way to that end.
I know I've seen the movie with audiences much more than Tim has. That, I actually go to, a lot of the theaters, and it was always great. The lights coming up after Batman Returns, and it was kids crying, people acting like they'd been punched in the stomach and like they'd been mugged. But, part of me relished that reaction, and part of me, to this day, oops,
One person would come in and go, oh, this is so much lighter than the first movie. And the next person would come in and go, oh, this is so much darker than the first movie. And it's like, well, light and dark are, they're opposites. So it's like, how can something be, and it was 50% passionately one way, passionately the other. And I thought, this is an odd dynamic. This is quite interesting.
I remember one write-up, I think it was in the USA Today, that basically panned the movie and said it looked like it was shot in an inkwell, which I guess is really a compliment, But at the same time, I don't know that I took it as a compliment. I took it as really kind of a criticism or a put down of the movie, because I don't think it came out to generally good reviews, even though it was the #1 movie. But a lot of people accused the storyline not being developed or meaningful in some kind of way. So I thought it was a bit misunderstood.
I did hear of somewhat of a backlash that it was too gross, black. We can't have black stuff coming out of his mouth.
The movie itself, apart from being a merchandising machine, apart from all the toy sales that it's supposed to generate, the movie itself was never presented as a child-friendly movie, and so I just think it's a mistake of perception. I think the parents who complained just got it wrong, but there was no attempt to deceive anyone.
I really dig the fact that even now I can, kids come up to me and if they don't know that I played the Penguin, once they do, they're really, charmed by it and taken by it. So you get into that kind of milieu of it all, and you say, yeah, it's great to be part of it. I'm really happy to be part of the Batman family.
I remember toying with the idea of doing another one, and I remember going into Warner Brothers and having a meeting. I'm going, you could do this, we could do that, and they go like, Tim, don't you want to do a smaller movie now, just something that's more, and about, half hour into the meeting, I go, you don't want me to make another one, do you? And they go, no. And I just said, no, I know you did. And so we just stopped it right there.
When you're a director like Tim and you have so many stories to tell, and you're so visionary. I mean, can you do the same character over and over again? I think we all knew that, you know, Tim had other places to go and other films to make. Would have been great for the audience because he would have made a lot of great Batman movies. But we wouldn't have had, you know, all these great films that he's made since then. The thing we tried to do with Batman Returns was kind of broaden the canvas a little bit, you know, have more fun with Gotham City, make it bigger and more of a kind of visual extravaganza.
We have basically the same parameters in that it's a caricature of a city, but we're approaching it a little more loosely and a little more fun and American.
Well, I'd worked with Bo on both, Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands, so, we're doing it in LA. So the trick was, he's a great designer, so how do we change it without it becoming something different? I think he did a really good job of that. We sort of added slightly more specific New York things, but blew it up again,
The first one, to me, was very nostalgic. This one's more fascist.
And when you're doing a sequel, it's tough because the idea isn't fresh anymore. I mean, people have seen Gotham. We wanted to get our own style, and so we kind of came up with the concept that this was kind of an international, even though it was an American city, it was like an international style. It's kind of a generic fascist neoclassic architecture. Big, huge sculptures, almost kind of Russian, in the size of the sculpture and stuff like that. It kind of gave it a real interesting sense for Gotham. Gotham means big anyway, so everything we did was sort of big.
So everything, even the suit, we took out the muscular thing and made it more sculptural, sort of fit the set more a little bit. Same with the Batmobile, kept the basic shape, just changed it to kind of make it fit in with the world we were creating.
This one also takes place in an icy cold environment, which would radically change any movie. By putting a blanket of snow on everything, you get a very strong black and white graphic contrast.
The first thing I read was, Gotham is bathed in a blanket of pristine snow. Well, to the normal Joe, boy, what a great concept that is. But for someone like me who's got to figure out how to put that on film, it's a nightmare. Especially when I know we're going to shoot it in the summer. So they're all right off the top, you got a problem. And then it goes from there. Okay, so we'll put some of it on the soundstage and we'll get foam and stuff, and it goes from there.
Okay, folks, places, it would take us like 3 days to really chill the stages down to like 30 degrees, what we needed to see the breath. And we had I don't know how many tons of air conditioning on every stage. It worked as long as they would keep the stage doors closed. Sometimes they got it, sometimes they didn't get it. And then like stage 16 where we had Gotham City, it's the tallest stage in Warner Brothers. It's like 65 feet tall, and there's so much volume in there, it took so much time to chill it down that you open the door for 5 minutes and you lose all the cold air. Where the Cobblepot's live, where they first discovered their child wasn't exactly what they thought it was. That was a fun set. That was one that Bo said, let's just go all out on this set. We didn't have a lot of money, but he said he just wanted to really, he said, make this fireplace as amazing as possible. One of our set designers, Richard Mays, put like 300 different molds on it and moldings all over it. And it was only in for a few seconds at the beginning of the movie, but it really kind of established a tone for the rest of the movie.
In the story, he's discarded by his parents and washes up in the sewer in an old, rotting, abandoned display area within the expo.
The concept was it was like an old marine land or something like that. It was an amusement park. It was abandoned, but it still held water, and this was his like little domain. His realm was here. Built a tank, and we thought we could just, to save money, just foam down to the floor, and then up the wall, but the water was constantly getting under the foam. So we ended up building a weir wall, which is a little dam outside to catch the water. And then that would leak, and we had another weir wall outside of that. We ended up with like 4 weir walls trying to hold all the water.
This is gonna be good.
I think that was the most exciting place to work because of the water and electricity and just the energy that the lighting made on the water. I think that was related to Expressionism, whether it was German Expressionism or where it came from, but it was my attempt at doing like a contemporary expressionistic movie.
Catwoman undergoes a real transformation. Where she lives is a caricature of many New York apartments I have been in where they're so tiny. For instance, her apartment is really shaped like many hallways, and the window, you only see half of it. And when she undergoes her transformation, she pretty much tears the place apart and opens it up and paints it black. She's not going to take any crap anymore. She's Catwoman.
Bruce Wayne's mansion was kind of funny. We wanted to make it feel really big. We had the library, big Tudor mansion kind of look, where the bat symbol comes through and leaves a pattern on the wall. The best part of that set was right next to it was the big fireplace, where we had the huge firebox, and the couch we had to make. It was really great because it was kind of this undulating couch and this huge firebox. You could have parked a car inside the firebox. And he opens up the Iron Maiden, and that's how he gets down into the Bat Cave. The Iron Maiden was Tim's call. He really liked the Iron Maiden. He liked that idea of getting in there, closing the doors, and down to the Bat Cave. The concept was, okay, he's in a cave, whatever, but everything's black for Batman. I mean, that's his color. So I kind of like, let's do everything like anthracite coal, like it was cut into a seam of coal. It's been hollowed out, and you see his bat control panel with all the instruments and stuff. And where the one precipice was, it was supposed to look like it's on like a butte or something, where it's just this like thing where the car is and everything, and the sides go way down infinitely. You don't really know. We put like those vapor-tight little cage lights so you know where the edge of this platform was. Kind of had a cool airport kind of feel to it. Campaign headquarters, that was a 2-level set. We wanted like to have like where the regular people came in, we wanted it to feel like very monochromatic, kind of like this is politics, you know, the run-of-the-mill, you know, these guys running for mayor. Kind of did like a generic political set there, but the upstairs, up the winding staircase, it changes. That was his kind of upstairs headquarters where he kind of ran everything. He had his little kind of throne chair and everything up there, kind of down and dark and creepy, and that was his work. We just made a huge undulating rooftop set. It was the extent of 2 stages. Even the scene where he first meets her on the rooftop, you just see all these rooftops going in the background. And we had a backing, painted backing that we'd just drag around, and it would just go on forever. And it was all done in camera. It was no visual effects there. And then we had this big conference room at the very top with this great surround, again, of buildings and backings. We had these special chairs made in this gorgeous round table. That was quite a set. The Shrek store was probably the second biggest set in the movie. Of course, that had to tie into the exterior that was on stage 16, which was the exterior of the Shrek store.
I think we went a little darker in the second one, which maybe some people were surprised by, but, you know, looking back, I think it makes it a great movie in many ways.
It's hard for me to describe these things with words. You know, you sit down and you draw pictures, you build models, and something feels right, and you do it. And, you know, in my working with Tim, you sort of mutter a few things, but basically it's a visual medium, and you create the image until it's right.
That was a very hard movie to do. I thought we pulled it off, and I thought it looked great. It was that kind of a show. It was like a big bucking bull, you know, and you're just trying to ride it until your 8 seconds is up and you get off.
Whenever you do a movie with Tim Burton, you have to know up front that Tim always has ideas. He had his concept of who the Penguin would be. So when we went to the design boards and started our sketches based on Danny DeVito, we had to, of course, instill the Tim Burton signatures. So we're talking about a character with white skin and dark circles around his eyes. It's a signature, and it works perfectly. It's not out of place for this particular character.
You know, I'd worked with Stan before on Scissorhands and his group of people, and so they were really always, I felt, really good at taking whatever little scribbles or whatever in essences and really bringing it to life and making it real.
When we see the initial sketch that Tim brings in, he doesn't always have down exactly what he wants the face to look like or what the makeup is going to be. So from his sketch, from that attitude, we expand on it. So what we do is take photographs of Danny DeVito and just play with his face you know, trying to get it as close to Tim's drawings as we can and keep that character yet still make it look like Danny DeVito. The most prominent thing that we're going to do is change his nose. So these sketches are pretty much just playing with noses.
When you get into then creating the actual beak, the feeling, the penguin look concepts where noses were beaks, bigger and broader, there's that little bit of organic feeling of this guy really could look like this.
We did a quickie appliance just for the test to see if Danny could be expressive through it, if he'd like it, and he did. And so from this point now, I'm just taking these shapes and refining them into his life cast with a bit more emphasis on his own structure. You study the pore texture and the character of his own face and transfer it as much as possible within this new character so that a lot of Danny is being projected forward. It's almost like taking his face and distorting it naturally out to this. Instead of adding something foreign on top of him, bring him through it this way. And this will be the final appliance.
The appliances that were designed for Danny as Oswald Cobblepot were pretty simple, actually. It was a very thin brow piece and a nose connected to it. And I think it had an upper lip as well, so he could have a lot of expression. Because we didn't want to lose the expression in his eyes, because that's very important for a character.
Neil would stand next to me with a clear beaker of liquid that had to be cold because it was glue. Couldn't be warmed. And I knew that, you know what I mean? And she would stand there with her brush. Just wait. I would have the tea. And, you know. And then there would be this moment where I'd put the tea down and she would start. And that first cold brush of glue all around my nose.
We glued down the eyebrows, and then I would start applying with the nose first, get it in place, make sure it was really well situated, because if it wasn't in exactly the right place, his mouth would be off, or it wouldn't cover his mouth totally, or something would be crooked, or the eyebrows would be crooked, or something. So every day I had to, that's where I started. I would get the nose in place and glue the rest of it down from there. Blending an appliance is taking the edge of the appliance and melding it with the skin so that you don't see a transition. You don't want to see where the appliance ends and the face starts. That's what blending is. It has to be a seamless match with skin and appliance. And sometimes that's very difficult because an appliance is opaque and your skin is translucent. So it's very important that you are a pretty darn good painter, because you have to paint that translucency into the appliance. Danny wore false teeth, uppers and lowers, and then I mixed up this concoction that was very simple. It was mouthwash with red and green food coloring in it, which kind of comes up like a really yucky, greeny black color. We kind of decided that it was some sort of bile.
I would always take a nice big mouthful of that and kind of let it ooze out when I was, you know, feeling adventurous.
I want to find out who I am by finding my parents, learning my human name. Simple stuff that the good people of Gotham take for granted.
We shaved the top of his head. So his hairline is actually much farther back than it normally is. And we add a hairpiece to that. And we add a lot of grease, and it comes out being real spindly and greasy.
Hey, you won't regret this, Mr. Shrek.
Most of the time I had gloves on, big black gloves, rubber ones that I wore. But if I had to wear the flippers, the flesh-colored flippers, you had to put them on and glue them on.
Danny wore these appliances on his hand, which was actually like kind of a glove without a thumb. In other words, it just fit over this part of his hand, so we would slide it on, and it was so when it was on, it came to kind of a point. You know, they had little fingernails on them, and he had his thumb, so he could hold on to things. And they were foam latex, so they were very pliable.
What I'd like to do first is to put these little glove thingies on you. Our research tells us that voters like fingers. So if we want to just lose this, we'll do it another time then. Okay, doke?
I have never seen anybody get into a character more organically And Danny came up to me and said, I love this. This is really wonderful. And I was not talking to Danny DeVito. I mean, the Penguin was there, and he was scary.
I think Danny really enjoyed doing the makeup. I mean, bar the fact that he had to get in and be in it all the time, I think when he was doing his shtick, he really enjoyed it. I mean, it was a fun character for him to do.
Danny DeVito took a character that had been known for years through the comic book series and created a character that no one had ever seen before, but at the same time was absolutely the Penguin that everyone knew, and for the first time saw what the Penguin was really supposed to look like and supposed to act like.
I always thought that we should take Oswald to, Vegas. Big room, write some good material for him, have him eat some raw fish, bring people up from the audience. Bring them up.
The penguin thing was kind of crazy, to have all these penguins. But a lot of them were puppets. There were a lot of early computer effects, but a lot of them were real. And it's not easy to find a lot of penguins, and their mating schedules are very complicated. When they're born, when they need to mate, when they need to be cold, when they need to warm up.
Action!
Big penguins, the little penguins. It was a lot of fun, but it was very complicated keeping this going for months and months, and which shots had which penguins.
We have 30 Blackfoot penguins and 12 king penguins that make up the shooting group. They're going to add to that in various ways to make an army of thousands of penguins.
All these birds here are hand-tamed. I wouldn't use any other birds at all. I'm like mummy or daddy to them, so I just gently persuasion with them.
When we start teaching them to wear the gear, we have to put it on little by little, slowly at first, so that if you just put it on them, they'd be apprehensive about it. But we very slowly show them that the hat's not going to bite them, and gradually put it on over a period of weeks so that they're accustomed to it.
Movie making is a somewhat unnatural thing to do, and you're always a little more nervous when you're working with children animals because you have to make sure everything is right.
You're all doing a fine job. Okay. They love it here.
What we've trained the birds to do is to come to a call, and when they get to where they're going, they each get a fish. And so they come to these puppy pens and with the bucket and the fish, and so we put the bucket, the puppy pens, and the fish where we want them to go, and whistle, and off they go, like magic. And it works every time and never fails.
My babies. I live with them. They're my babies.
The penguins had a great time. They just have to walk from one place to the other, and they got fed a lot. But there were certain things that penguins couldn't do. They couldn't actually fire the missiles on their backs because clearly that was dangerous to them. We weren't going to do that. They couldn't escort the dead penguin character down the ramp into the water. They couldn't do the things that in the movie they were required to do. So the production went to Stan Winston to develop and build penguin puppets who could work in close-up and were articulated to do some of the actions.
Penguins had to act in this. So one of our big problems was the fact that we were going to be creating penguins that were a combination of animatronic puppets and little people in suits that would actually be on the set with live penguins. And for you as an audience not to be able to know the difference between which ones are the puppets doing what they're being told to do and which ones are the real penguins running around doing what they want to do. And it worked.
We're building right here a prototype penguin. We haven't done anything as far as working on the cosmetics from this angle. We're working purely on the mechanics, the segmenting of the ring core, the radio-controlled 3-axis flipper that it's got. We take the actual fiberglass pieces and the UVEX vacuform understructures and try and make it move the same way the skeleton does. We're assuming that it's going to take 3 to 5 operators per penguin. We're not sure if the penguins are going to be sitting still in any one scene, or if it's a scene where it's walking around, it would require more operators. It'll vary from action to action, but I would think 5 operators per penguin would be a good average.
Look at him. Are you talking to me? Are you looking at me? Are you looking at me? Why don't you look at them? Fine. What you're not seeing right now, of course, is all of the head will be totally mechanized. The beak is mechanized. The eyes will be mechanized. They will be able to emote. So within a week, we will be going into mass assembly of the number of penguins that we have to do, which is quite a number. We have 3 different sizes of animatronic penguins, and we're doing 10 of each of those. And we're doing 6 animatronic penguins that are little people in suits. So they're little people in suits, and they also have animatronic heads and wings.
This too is just a prototype. The eventual finished piece will be a UVEX vacuform. Go ahead, help put that on, Michiko. We're going to have a soft foam latex skin that will encompass the eye areas and the webbing at the corner of the mouth on both sides, so that we're not going to have quite this much rigid material. The beak will be a rigid material, and the skull will blend back into the fur at the base. We'll have motion of the mouth, which will be driven by a radio-controlled servo. The eyes will have up, down, left, right, also driven by radio control. And there's going to be a lower lid squint.
There were more animatronic characters working at the same time on Batman Returns than any movie I can remember to date.
We did some studying. I want to say that there were a week or so before they moved everything down to the lot. We all met at Stan's studio for Penguin rehearsals and get to know your puppet and get to know how it's put together and the mechanics of it. This is how a bird moves.
I believe the word you're looking for is
I do remember that the penguins on the penguins' lair were all anchored to the floor, with the exception of the emperor penguins that were the suit performers. So all of those 30-some-odd puppets didn't do any walking, so it was all just wing flaps and head movement. So if Danny is walking up from his boat talking to his penguin children, all the attention was supposed to go to where he was. And at the same time, they had to look alive.
Dan wasn't able to do, and through no fault of his own, is that we did have an army, and we had wide shots where we had to see hundreds, if not thousands, of penguins marching down the street in formation and then turning around and going the other direction and doing all sorts of things like that. Those shots were actually invented sort of late in the day. We didn't know when we started the movie we were actually going to be creating shots of that scale. We created CG penguins at Boss Film.
We drew a bunch of lines on a wall for height and scale and distance. And I spent a whole day filming penguins walking, stopping, doing things, so the animators could actually see what they did as characters. That was then turned over to our computer guys, fledgling group, follow what the penguins were doing in wireframe. So you'd start with a wireframe, so we'd get a nice walk going, a nice cycle. What that frame is for is to pin the skin on. At the intersection of each of these vertical and horizontal lines is a mathematical point. So the skin is then pinned onto those points, and now you have a three-dimensional thing with skin that's where it's supposed to be. And that was basically the technique. You make one penguin do something, and you multiply it 100 times.
The wonderful thing about the penguins was how they walked and moved. They really moved like penguins, and they were a delight to work on. We had some real talent here.
The penguins have reached Gotham Square.
Using all of these methods together, using digital animation, using real birds, using people in suits, using animatronics, using all of these technologies and blending them seamlessly is why the Army of Penguins worked so well.
You get from Tim what he wants to see. I don't think Tim really cares how you achieve it. There were certain people that had certain abilities. Some people were good animators, some people were good structurally, you never knew. And so I felt that you could put together a team of groups to work on a film that would be able to create work of equal quality.
The history of visual effects films of the day was one company generally did the entire job. And this was one of those films that was going to be split up based on who could do what best in the amount of time they had for the amount of money they had. For us, we were known for optical compositing and model making. to get as much in camera as possible. Everybody takes it for granted now that everything's created digitally, but at that time, it wasn't.
The style and look of all of us had to match to make sure that that style was agreed upon, identified, and then executed under Mike Fink's overall visual effects supervision. And of course, Tim would then see shots and give us notes if he wanted some changes or to make some additions. We photographed down at Warner Brothers on the set, and so you can see we just had the actors walk by from right to left, and we took that live action and we made a matte painting that went around it. And it's been reduced so that that actual scene has been reduced into the painting. The camera then would rephotograph the painting and the projection together to create a new scene. In addition to that, we would also go in and put in falling snow on many different layers and haze and mist to kind of make it that kind of wintry looking environment that is established for the film. This is Wayne Manor. You can see that this is a miniature. We have fiberfill clouds, a material that is used in pillows. It's soft and you can sculpt it, so we would attach them to scrims that moved behind the scene slowly, as if to suggest there's moving clouds. And also it gave us something to project our bat beacon onto. This is shot on the set down at Warner Brothers. They had a real high-powered projector for projecting that beacon on the library wall, and during the photography the actual symbol broke and the wing became distorted. We ended up having to fix that later in post. Also, the ideal exposure for the bat beacon on the wall doesn't give you a nice bright beam, so we had to go back and put the beam in later. The beam then is shot as a separate element, and then we would combine the scene with our added beam with the onset beam of what's up on the wall to make the composite.
My favorite scene is still the Ice Princess falling into the miniature and Batman looking down inside.
Something that John Bruno used to say is that this is a set. We have to use this. It's a set. And on Batman Returns, we were able to use it as a set 2 or 3 times. The shot where you follow her down in the building, we also shot that on the miniature. We shot her at half speed, 12 frames per second. Then when we projected that film, it made her hair incredibly frantic, like it was blown very fast by the wind, but her motions looked normal because she had been at half speed to compensate for the camera shutter speed.
They're very short images, but they're very successful, and people don't know how it was done. And that's always the sleight of hand of visual effects, or the brothers of the black cloth, the guys that work behind the scenes. That's some of my favorite stuff in the movie.
Up until Batman Returns, most films were made with visual effects which were done optically, and there were increasing numbers of shots being done digitally from the late 80s through the early 90s. Batman Returns was the first film that I know of where we replicated in CG creatures that existed, that people could recognize and acknowledge as real.
We were still in the era of making the subtle transition to using CG elements but compositing them optically. I think it was Video Image was the company at the time that did the CG bats.
We modeled a very simple bat and gave a very simple texture and flew the bat, lots of bats around, and filmed it out and showed it to Tim, and he just said, that's it, that's what we're going to do. The bat boat racing down the sewer, Bob and Dennis Skotek just came to mind. Their company is called Forward Productions, but everybody calls them the Skoteks. And I brought them in and said, this is what we got to do. It's got to be huge. I don't want it under third scale. It means the tunnel's going to have to be at least 8 feet in diameter. It's got to be 100 and some odd feet long. You need a piece of real estate big enough to build it. We're going to have to shoot over cranked. It means we have to make the bat boat go that much faster just to make it look like it's going fast, even though we have to shoot over cranked to keep the water to scale. Can you do it? And they said, sure.
2,003.
They did the entire title sequence. These are major setups with water and miniatures and shadows and separate passes, and I don't think anybody really notices it. They watch the titles, it all runs under the titles. and you don't realize you've just seen 2 or 3 minutes of non-stop visual effects, and it's pretty seamless. We could roll it into the set. It was designed to be drivable, but I'm not sure it did much more than just a very slow speed kind of a motion.
Light the fire!
Sure looks good.
Fire's lit!
All of the high-speed work was done by the Skotex. As Batman jettisons fenders and body parts so that his car can get slimmer, you never see it transition completely from one to the next because there was no way to do that. Now you could do that. Now you could have the whole thing transition in CG right in front of your eyes. After we'd completed the film and I was literally packing up my office, the phone rings. We need at least 3 more shots. And I said, how much time do we have? 9 days. One of those 3 shots that we created was a shot that I did with Craig Barron.
Mike Fink called me up and said, we have a little problem with the end of the film. We need you to do another shot. We got this sketch from Tim Burton for a new shot, which would clearly show that Catwoman had survived and that she was staring at the bat beacon for the very last shot of the film. So we went ahead and did this shot very quickly, all at the last minute. We didn't have Michelle Pfeiffer available anymore, so we created this animatronic Michelle Pfeiffer puppet, and we made a little motion control rig that allowed her to sort of move and react. Again, we're not seeing her face, we only shot the puppet from the back.
When I was a kid, I read the comic books. And then, of course, you see the TV show. And you have a kind of an image of this Penguin character already. But just get that right out of your mind, because this is so totally unique and different.
If you go back and look at what Burgess Meredith did on the TV show, and I thought that was an incredibly great performance of bringing that character to life, Danny DeVito had the attitude. Danny DeVito had that dark humor that I think is really indicative of the Penguin, and the way that Tim really converted him into a fully grotesque supervillain that bared little resemblance to Danny DeVito himself.
He's such a great spirit, too, on the set because, you know, because he's an actor, director, and producer and all.
I'd look at him, I was kind of envious sometimes because I knew you could really get locked away and just go for it.
I'd always said that there was never going to be a Penguin in the cards for me. I mean, as the story was generating over a couple of years. But this was nothing like the Penguin that I had imagined. And once I hooked into, what Tim had in mind, I was pumped.
And we will snatch them, carry them into the sewer, and toss them into a deep, dark, watery grave.
Penguin, that was a character that evolved in interesting ways, too. I think when I came up with something in the script that he takes shredded documents that have been shredded and goes painstakingly glues them together. For that, suddenly unleashed a lot in Tim of the guy underground and he's taking all our crap, but he's doing something with it, and he knows all our secrets.
Tragic irony or poetic justice? You tell me.
My God, it's true. And the sewer.
He comes from a place that is unknown to any of us. After being thrust into a situation that he was as a baby and coming through it. And not only coming through it, but educating himself and turning the tables, becoming the leader.
There's an empathy to the character. There's a softness to the character. There's a need for that character to be wanted.
What is it that he missed in life? You look in Gotham City and you see kids playing, families enjoying the holiday season, the things that Oswald's never been exposed to, things that were never available to him. Down deep inside, there's still that humanity. Even though those are the people that kicked him out, threw him out, they are, after all, his parents. Never forgetting that in a second, if they were there at that moment, he could slaughter them, even though he feels they are his parents and he's moved by it.
You know, in a weird way, you have two characters from very similar backgrounds. You know, they're both born to privilege, fighting for the soul of the city. You have Batman disguised as a villain to fight, you know, the criminal element. Yet you have Cobblepot, the much more villainous looking of the two, who's cloaked himself in respectability to charm the city and become its mayor and run the city that way. One was scarred by what happened to his parents. The other one is scarred by his parents who you know, reject him and kind of cast him aside to become this freak.
When the giant penguins walk in and pick up the penguin at the end as pallbearers, I remember holding my breath when those penguins walked out thinking, no, they're not really gonna, and then they pick them up somehow and carry them into the pool, and I just thought, oh, it's just too perfect.
I loved it. I had a great time playing it.
Batman has a problem. He's only attracted to bad girls. And the Catwoman is the perfect foil for him in that regard.
She has a great relationship with Bruce Wayne and Batman. You know, and you can't do that with any other villain. She's the opposite image of Batman.
I wanted to create a female villain because most of the villains prior to that time were males. So I created Catwoman in the image of a woman for a female audience. So that way we would grab the male audience and the female audience.
Well, the key thing I always remember about her is that when she first showed up, she didn't have the costume. She didn't have any costume. She was this beautiful brunette dressed up in like a green dress or something, but nothing flamboyant or super heroine or villainous. It would be another appearance or two before she would have like the cat mask, which would be more like an actual cat head on top of her, before she would finally have the stylized look that we would come to recognize as sort of the purple and green caped version that would last for a good, I would say, 40 years of the character's comic history.
With Catwoman, the filmmakers really had to reinvent the character. You wanted to have somebody who was caught between the two worlds of Batman and the Penguin and Oswald and Bruce. So what better way to show that than a character who is somewhat in conflict with herself, who goes from being a very mousy, put-upon woman who comes back to avenge the crime that was done to her.
Selena. That's my name, Maximilians. Don't wear it out or I'll make you buy me a new one.
The DC version of Catwoman and the TV version of Catwoman, she was much tougher, you know, openly like aggressive female from the get-go. And like all she did was throw on a costume. And to me that wasn't interesting. And just, you know, saying, okay, this is the way it was there, now I'm going to do it that way too. It was completely uninteresting to me. And I was willing to, like, you know, quote unquote, lose the job. That was my take, to really start her off as like kind of a lowly secretary. You know, I love in the fact that in the film that Michelle Pfeiffer doesn't even have a close-up until like 20 minutes in the movie, that she's kind of in the background of scenes and like you don't really see her. That I wanted that it was this, you know, this woman that starts off low and it becomes about empowerment, and it goes beyond feminism into something creepy and feminine, like something scary and dark. So I really felt like I was giving this a twist in a good way.
Hey, stud. I thought we had something together.
Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman is awesome. She was kind of slinky and kind of vampy and in a kind of campy, kind of Julie Newmar way, but still she had like a real underlying psychotic edge to her. You know, you knew at any moment she could really, you know, really go off and do somebody some real harm.
It's one of my favorite performances of anything I've been around, you know.
For the most part, I really approached it from the standpoint of the psychology of the character and this dual personality and what that meant, and everything really springing from that. Sometimes her sexuality will come out of a manipulation, sometimes it will come out of a playfulness, and sometimes it'll be very real. And we didn't exactly know where those moments were going to be. And then after a while, it just kind of took on a life of its own. And it became obvious where it had to be.
Catwoman is best described as an anti-hero because she's not a villainess in the most diabolical of senses. She's not a murderess. She's not about gaining vengeance for any particular thing. She's basically about kind of the anarchy of stealing from the man in a way.
That's the thing that's always been intriguing about this part. People come up to me now and they say, now, is she a good guy or is she a bad guy? And they're confused because it was always left very ambiguous. And I always liked that. I always liked that they just let it be that.
He's an industrialist. He, among other things, has Shrek's department store.
Originally, the Max Shrek character, he is the golden boy son of the Cobblepots, and it turns out that he and Penguin are brothers, and there was that kind of dichotomy in the movie of like the saintly brother who runs the city and the ultimate black sheep who's thrown in the sewer, and how they come up together. But the script and the movie is way too rich to begin with, and that was just another layer that we finally had to lose.
When I suggested to Tim, I thought of Christopher Walken. And Tim, who loves ghouls and skeletons and odd things, said, "Oh, no," he said, I'm afraid of him. He scares me. And I said, "But Tim, you're supposed to be afraid of Max Shrek."
They made up a fictional character that's not in Batman's universe, and suddenly he becomes the most exciting character in the film. Well, sorry, but that's what you get when you put Christopher Walken in a role.
He says there's no such thing as too much power. He says that's what his life is about. Now, those are actually his lines. I think he means it. Max probably didn't have a lot of education, and that he sort of made his own way, you know. Probably because when you're like that, there aren't that many people you can talk to.
The Burton Batman films seem to be, they look to Citizen Kane most of all. Bruce Wayne even sounds like Kane, doesn't he? And of course, Kane is malformed for life by losing his parents at an early age as well. All through the Batman stories, it's about how terrible experiences in early life malform people. I mean, it's what happened to Batman, but it's what happens to everybody in these films.
I remember in the second movie, the first time you see the bat signal go up, it shines in the sky, and then they've got these mirrors and reflectors on top of Wayne Manor that reflect it down onto Bruce, who's sitting in a study just like this, just waiting. And you see the guy has no purpose in life at all other than just sit there and wait for that light to come in. And once the light shines on his face, he's alive.
The fact we were seeing more of the character out there, the sense of like, no, Batman's always out there. He's out there like every night doing something. And that was a key thing to making the legend work.
Are you concerned about that strange, heroic penguin person?
I think he knows who his parents are.
He's a weird character, he's somebody who's likes to remain hidden and in some ways repressed, and that's a hard thing to portray in a kind of an extreme comic book movie. Michael just, is very, after going through one of them, he came into it with real strength and knowing of the character. So, and it helps because it gives it the foundation and it makes it Batman.
When Tim and I talked about doing the character again, I wasn't necessarily looking to expand the character in terms of more lines, more to do. He and I both agreed, let's just take the things we've discovered now, because we had to figure it out in the first movie, and see what really are the best parts of him and make those parts richer. I'd done the movie once before, so I knew the fundamentals. The romantic aspect was another level that we didn't get to see in the first one, and I was more relaxed because I was in LA. I've gone to my own home at the end of the day. For me, there were a lot of aspects that were more enjoyable.
Mistletoe can be deadly if you eat it.
A kiss can be even deadly.
He's the only actor I know who would go through my script and goes, I should say less here. I should say less here. I had so many angry Batman rant speeches. And he's like, Batman would never say that. Like, Batman should just say this line right here. And, usually he was right. He definitely wanted to go darker all the time, which was fine with us. A lot of people complained that our Batman actually killed people. And like some purists were saying, like, Batman would never kill people. But I would always say, we don't live in the time where you can drop criminals off with a net on the front of City Hall. The times are darker, so you've got to make your character darker.
Alfred is one of the most powerful characters in the cast. He's very loyal to Bruce. He's the one who knows the small child. He knows the child in Bruce. He's the only one who's ever been there and's been with him every step of the way. He knows how Bruce Wayne became Batman. He understands it. He accepts it. He's part of it.
Certainly in the Tim Burton films, there was this wonderful, almost childlike simplicity to the Batman character. I'm doing my stuff, and he has no idea how the phone bill's getting paid. Alfred just takes care of all that stuff.
A piece of Alfred that they don't really take into the movies, which is great in the books, is that he was a combat surgeon. Like, he was a guy during the war who would stitch people up like a medic. So when Batman comes back after a night of getting the crap knocked out of him, Alfred puts him back together again. And you don't really get that in the movies too much.
I was in a play in New York, and it was called Breaking the Code, and I won an award for it. And as I was getting the award, apparently Tim saw this, and he said, "I know that man. You'd believe anything he said. We'll have him." Then he asked me to play Alfred. And he was sweet because he told me about what he felt about Alfred, but very much encouraged me to have ideas about Alfred. It's going to be your idea of a servant who's totally honorable, totally straight, and totally square, you know?
Tell her there's a big business deal came up. No, you know what? Tell her, let her know that none is I'm gonna dumb, be my girlfriend kind of way.
I will relay the message.
Great.
Alfred is largely a figment of my imagination, except, of course, that I have based him on a real person. The real person that I know is a butler, so he's always been able to look after himself, he's always been able to sew on buttons, do little bits of ironing, and he does the cooking, so he's a perfect kind of gentleman's gentleman, although he looks after a lady. So that's my main source, and the other source I have is the butler in the house where we did some location work. I followed him around, and he gave me all the details. Don't show any cuffs. If you're waiting at table, no one wants to see your dirty cuffs. Don't show a handkerchief here. The one's showing now, but that's an accident. It jumped up of its own accord. It shouldn't be there. And those sort of things, I got from him. So those are the two people who I based Alfred on. Mr. Wayne, a reminder, tonight is that loathsome party hosted by the odious Mr. Shrek. May we RSVP in the resoundingly negative? Well, now then, the bond between Batman and Alfred, I think, is the fact that ever since he was a child, since he was a very small boy, he hasn't had a mother, he hasn't had a father. All he's had is an old-fashioned nanny. And I play an old-fashioned nanny who tries to bring him up like a little gentleman. In a way, I think this suits my character. Alfred suits my character. He is a nanny. He doesn't stand for any rubbish, but at the same time, he's there to look after and take care of his ward,
And there's a line in the script that I had that still gets the biggest response in an audience, the reference to the first film where Michael Keaton says, well, you were the guy who led Vicky Vale into the Batcave, which I knew from the first film drove everyone nuts. So I had some fun at Alfred's expense in that one.
Once you've got the idea, you've got a rope to hang on to, then you can go anywhere, And I felt that with Tim. We could go anywhere,